And welcome once again to the JC and Morgan podcast. Hope you've missed us. A little bit of a longer respite than normal. That's predominantly my fault. I'm knee deep in college baseball postseason. Just got ACC championship in Charlotte, had a regional from South Bend, and I've got the super regional Arkansas and NC State this weekend, beginning tomorrow. So it's been a busy time, and after that is done, then things cool off a bit, and we'll be back to our weekly arrival on this thing. And we appreciate, as I always say, when you guys are upset that we've been gone, then I know that we're doing something right. If we weren't doing anything right, you really wouldn't care. So I'm glad to hear when you guys ask, when are you guys coming back? So we are back. He's JC Sherbert at 24/7 Sports. I'm Mike Morgan of ESPN and the SEC Network. We got a special program. We've been guest heavy really for the last few months. We've had some incredible guests. I can't express enough gratitude to the folks that have joined us. And today will be no exception. We're going to dip ourselves into the ink of head coaches. And Shane Beamer will be first on the docket, the head coach of South Carolina. Plenty of interesting things to talk about with him, not just, breaking down the two deep and Kevin Harris and Luke Doty and defense and everything else, but get to know more about him, the process, how he got to this point, how the job came about, all that good stuff. So he will join us about 30 minutes in. And in the meantime, we've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about, JC. It's been an interesting week or so. I mean, we are talking about radical changes coming down the pike in college football, and we're going to touch on those. But first off, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. It's been, the month of June I've dedicated to getting back into shape. And so I've been on a calorie restrictive diet, and I've talked about this, and it's been hell, but no pain, no gain, right? I've got some beach trips and cookouts coming up, and trips out of town in July and August, and some concerts. And, I don't want to be standing up at a concert and be so large I block people. So I figured sacrifice June for July, August, and the football season. And so that's kind of what I've been focused on. And obviously, with the bigspur.com, with recruiting coming back for the first time in 15 months, with all the talk around college football, it's been busy from a work standpoint. Really, for the first time in a long time, I felt like every day there's a lot to digest around the sport, both locally, kind of where I cover, and also nationally.
No doubt. And by the way, that's all inspiring. I need a little bit of that inspiration myself. I've got a wedding to get ready for in a few months, and I'm marrying a Kentucky girl, and we've already got plans to be at a lake in Kentucky and the beach in Florida. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to get a whole lot of working out in this time of year for yours truly. This is where I might pack on a few. But July will be get it together. Actually, late June, July will be get it back together. Like you said, I mean, things are starting to get back to normal with recruiting now. And before you know it, we're going to be talking about the fall and practice. And we're going to be breaking down schedules and everything else that goes along with it. I don't want to start with NIL because it's so, when I talk about NIL, although I think it's extremely important, it starts to make my head hurt. And I don't think either one of us got into this to start breaking down things like name, image, likeness, things talking about senators in D.C. debating this, that, and the other. And so let's start with the big story of the week. And the big story of the week is playoff expansion. And this is not your typical, hey, we got 3 hours to fill on a summertime talk show. So the red meat to the audience is always just, hey, how about playoff expansion? And the phone lines light up and boom, you got yourself a show. This now is pretty legit because there's some pretty heavyweight reporters that are reporting this. Now, again, some of these reporters are the same ones that told you there wouldn't be a college football season, nor should they. Some of these reporters, unfortunately, can't help but let their politics get into everything that they cover in sports. But I do trust the words of the Pete Thamels, Heather Denich's, in terms of they are hearing there's a lot of momentum for this. And I'm not hearing anything to the contrary from some of the people that I would suspect if there was really a major blockade out there, then I almost have a feeling we would have heard about that. And we're not hearing it. Mm-hmm. So here's my conclusion, JC, and then I'll want to bat it to you and see what you think. I've always thought we're heading to playoff expansion. I didn't think it would necessarily happen before the deal is up and there's 5 more years left on this 12-year contract of a 14 playoff. And I have said on every platform that I'm on, I never thought it would go past 8. If I am wrong on that, then I am wrong. But I know for a fact there are some pretty powerful people that don't want 12. My question becomes, is this like one party, one vote? Is this each Power 5 commissioner has equal influence on this? I don't think the group of 5 commissioners have an equal vote. Why do I say that? Because if the group 5 commissioners really want something that the Power 5 commissioners don't want, guess what? There's always that threat of seceding from the union, right? Yeah. They can always hang that over the head. Like, okay, you're gonna play that game where you got more votes. See ya. You are now you are de facto 1AA football, and we've got our own thing with 64 teams in Notre Dame. That's always out there. But what's the monkey wrench in all this is that the Pac-12 has been so, for lack of a better word, bad, that they have been excluded from this more often than not. The Big 12 has been excluded several times, other than Oklahoma. The Big 10 has even had years where they haven't been in it. And so it's effectively been an SEC-ACC party. And I'll throw one more factor in all this. Do not underestimate that even major programs, in fact, mostly major programs, lost anywhere between $75 and $100 million last year in college football revenue. And this is the quickest fix to get it back. So I am starting to believe this is more than just random speculation, that there truly is a significant movement to have expansion. I'm still not entirely convinced it's going to be 12, but I think it's going to happen, and I do think it might happen sooner than the 5 years left on this deal. Your thoughts?
I agree, and that's just because it popped up 12 surprised me. I'll be honest with you. I didn't expect it to go there, but 12 actually may be, as much as I'm not, I'm not a big expansion guy. I thought 4 was good, and I think that some of the problems with the dominance of, the same teams every year, it has to do, number one, with that program in Tuscaloosa, and number two, the fact that the schools in the ACC and Big 12 can't seem to get their act together, and really with the Big 10, it's getting that way too. I mean, Michigan and Penn State have been competitive at times. Wisconsin's been competitive at times, but Ohio State's ruled that league. You mentioned the Pac-12, and, top to bottom, they're as competitive as the other 4 leagues. They just don't have a great team with the elite talent that those other schools have because, frankly, they've been hemorrhaging players from what I call their recruiting breadbasket in the state of California. So, and all those guys are going east or to the Northwest right now. So it's a situation where if you go to 12, if you're going to include the group of 5, and I've preached this from the start, nothing against the group of 5, but it's fundamentally unfair when you start to think about it to go with, okay, let's go with, let's say Georgia, okay, has Alabama on the schedule in the regular season, okay, and Georgia goes and loses by 1 point in Tuscaloosa during the regular season, right? Alabama's undefeated. And then they went out and they go to the SEC championship game in Atlanta, and Alabama beats them again by a field goal. Georgia's blown everybody else out, but they have 2 losses. And this happens to be one of the years where all the conference champs are undefeated, and you got a lot of teams with 1 loss like Notre Dame or whatever. And then you have App State, and I'm using that as an example, or UCF, Let's say App State's biggest win was beating NC State that finished 5-7 in Raleigh. And they're 12-0, but they get the auto bid, and then you have a chance of a 2-loss Georgia being left out, particularly if you look in the SEC West that year and you have an 11-1 LSU, Texas A&M, or Auburn, because that other SEC team is going to get in. So tell me that's fair with an 8-team deal. When you get to 12, it changes things because there's not that much difference between 5 and 8, but 5 and 12 there is. And I think at that point there's room for everybody. And these people that are anti-SEC out there, and they are many, this is actually for the Southeastern Conference huge. If they'd have had this in place this entire past decade, there would have been at least, with the exception of maybe of 2016, there would have been 2 and 3 teams, maybe 4 at times, from the SEC in a 12-team playoff.
Can I just tell you, just on your point, I don't mean to interrupt, but to your point, the last 5 years, we had some of our guys crunch the numbers. The last 5 years, the SEC would have had 4 bids. So 4 of the 12, literally a third, would have been from the Southeastern Conference. Go ahead.
Yeah, so those that don't like the SEC, that's kind of giving them more of a shot there. And there are some years when, if you ended up getting in a tournament kind of deal, that the 2 best teams, quite frankly, are from the SEC. So, looking at it, I think that I would rather it go. I've maybe evolved a little bit on this. I'd rather it almost go to 12 than 8 if they're going to have an automatic group of 5. And I've preached against that, but the bottom line is, Mike, it doesn't matter what J.C. Sherbert thinks about the group of 5, and we can sit here and say group of 5 playoff will be great, and everybody else can too. The group of 5 commissioners aren't buying that. I think they smell the money, and they're hoping beyond hope that there's a March Madness style upset at some point, which is not going to happen probably. And so I think with them, their standpoint, from what I read from Dennis Dodd and Pete Thamel and others, they're going to sue if they don't get an automatic bid. They're to that point. So, if you have to include those folks, I think 12 is fair because I don't think, the number 13 team, the number 13 team still may have an argument, right? But it's more acceptable, I think, with that size of a field than 8, where you're probably most times that G5 team is bumping out a very quality Power 5 team that, because of schedule, gets left out.
Yeah, I think Cincinnati would have been a legit top 12 team last year, nearly beat Georgia in their bowl game. UCF, as you mentioned a few years ago. But that's few and far between.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, but if the Group 5 decided to file a lawsuit, again, what is to stop the Power 5 from saying, hey, we'll just go break off from the NCAA. You guys do your own thing. I don't know where in court they would have a leg to stand on. I don't know. I'd love to hear from a legal expert on that. And you're right. That is going to be one of the major bones of contention, whether or not to give the Group 5 an automatic bid. And I get it. They want a seat at the table. So for them to just say, no, why don't you guys have your own playoff? They're not buying that. They want to be a part of this. And they, most importantly, they want to be part of the cash cow that is the playoff, and that will be even more so when it is expanded. Look, I don't think this does anything to hurt the SEC because you're going to see multiple SEC teams in a 12-team playoff if it is 12 every year. I mean, every year. And more often than not, it's going to be more than 2. What it does, I think the theory is that all of a sudden the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and leagues such as that will now be able to sell recruits on, hey, okay, it's still the same 5 teams competing for a national champion, but at least we're in the playoff. We're there, so you're going to be there for at least one game if you come to school XYZ. So I get that. I'm just surprised. And, reading some of the things, this is from Pete Thamel's article on Yahoo. He says he spoke to a number of what he calls stakeholders. I'm guessing a lot of those would be conference commissioners, athletic directors, university officials. He says, amid those conversations, a surprise emerged. Officials on campuses, in conference offices, and in the television world have expressed an openness toward a 12-team playoff as the most likely result. Quote, the reason you go to 12 is because you can develop the road of least resistance toward a good result. That's a silly argument to me. You don't need 12 to get a good result. 8 would certainly suffice for that. Another snag that makes some uncomfortable with 8 teams is who'd get left out. If there are 6 automatic bids, for example, a team ranked 4 or 5 could theoretically be left out, and a team ranked 18, for example, makes the field. The scenario makes some uncomfortable. Well, again, that goes to the root of, do you actually give the group of 5 an automatic bid? I just can't help, call me cynical on this, I don't think there was any momentum for this to happen. I mean, it was talked about and some people wanted it, but for momentum to actually happen before the pandemic, I think the financial strain of the pandemic really caused some people to take another look at this and say, maybe we ought to think twice about, just kind of putting this off for a while because we got a lot of money to make up. When SEC schools are taking, in effect, an advance, right, of about $23 million, that's what that was. That wasn't newfound money. That's borrowing money from future TV revenues once the ESPN takeover of CBS package deal takes over. That's what that is. So if SEC schools are doing that, then other conference schools are hurting. And there's no easier way than to get money into the school's pockets than this. There's just nothing you can do than to just expand the playoff and the dollars will come.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will. I mean, and you're also talking about, teams playing as many as 17 games in a season, which has been an argument against for a long time. But heck, high school teams do it. Pro teams do it. I mean, I've seen high school teams play 15, 16 games in a year. And really, you'd have to be one of the lower 4-seeded or 8-seeded teams in the playoff and miraculously win 4 games in a row to get to the championship and to actually play 17. Other than that, you're talking about one additional game for the, what Clemson and Alabama and the other schools have been doing since the playoffs started. So I don't really buy that argument either. I'm curious to see the structure. I think there's discussions to be had about what happens to the bowls because I don't know that you sit there and have fans travel to neutral sites 4 weeks in a row. I think semifinals and finals will stay on neutral fields. Maybe the bowls get the quarterfinals. Maybe they don't. If you do that, then you're talking about the 1 seed not getting a home game, but the 8 seed does. Right. So there's a lot to be discussed about the logistics. But in terms of what's good for the sport, and look, and I also think auto bids. There are some people out there, and some of the articles I read said, "Well, auto bids may not happen." If it's a concern at all to expand the interest, and I think this is more of a fan thing because the ratings have been off the chart and all that, and I think it's fans that don't make the playoff that are upset about it. The Cotton Bowl is not that exciting anymore, and who cares? And it's just 4 teams, and all. I think it's more a fan thing. I think over time it could erode. But you're talking about a long time. But if you care at all about access and excitement and having the playoffs sort of touch other teams, you got to do auto bids for the Power Fives. That way, you add a little drama to it. And instead of the playoff touching 4 teams a year, it de facto touches 17 teams. You expand it by 13 teams that, hey, look, it may be a long shot. You may not win 5 games in a row to win the national championship if you're Northwestern last year, but you got a shot, man. And that's magical. I mean, it's magical. That's why March Madness is so popular. Hey, well, you know what? You got a shot. That's why they still play conference tournaments in college basketball. Well, the season, it isn't over. Now, football to me is not a tournament sport like basketball. However, you do auto bids. The SEC championship game is always going to be exciting and a big money maker. But the other conference championship games might, quite frankly, unless there's something big at stake nationally, they don't really get the attention the SEC does. Mm-hmm. The SEC, on that Saturday, everybody kind of watches the good teams, but that SEC game's the biggest. I think this helps the Big Ten, Pac-12, Big 12 championship game because then you have like a Baylor a couple of years ago has a shot or whatever. So, that's why I sort of like 12. I think with 8, if you do auto bids, it kind of gets weird a little bit to me. Mm-hmm. And if you have an upset, it can throw the whole thing off. The other thing, though, if on the other side of that argument is how often do we see upsets in conference championship games?
Rarely.
I mean, you look for the last 30 years since they've had conference title games, you can count on one hand, really, the massive upsets.
No doubt. The one that always stands out in my mind is 96.
Texas, Nebraska.
Yep, John Makovic, the fourth down play. That's like the first significant big-time upset I remember in a conference championship game.
A&M beat Kansas State and Michael Bishop, too, that week. Knocked them out. Michigan State, Ohio State in 2013, that let Auburn get in.
Yep.
I can't remember when one happened in the SEC. I just don't. Has there ever been an upset, like a big upset in the SEC championship?
I mean, there's been really big game. There's been really
LSU 2001. LSU 2001 against Tennessee. Tennessee wins. Tennessee wins that. They go to the Bowl. Rohan Davey goes out. Matt Malk comes in.
Right.
Saban's probably signature win.
But I'd love to know what the point spread on that was.
Other than that, though, I mean, you look through history and there's just, when Alabama's better than Florida, Alabama wins. And when Florida's better, they win. I mean, it just hadn't happened. But, there have been some classic games like Georgia-Bama.
Right. That's what I was saying. That's a classic game. But no matter who won, wouldn't have been a major upset.
Yeah, So, so the chances of that happening and throwing it off and throwing your 8-team bracket off, and my point is rare, and you still get the access. But for the reasons I've stated, if you're going to expand it, just go to 12 and then figure out something to do with the bowls. That's my thing. And you got to sort of tweak the bowls and make them kind of programming, which is what they are, what we've talked about the whole time.
Well, yeah. I mean, as I've said a number of times, it's December and people want to put something on. So they will watch Ball State versus Georgia State in the Pringles Bowl because it's on. And it's December 18th and it's football and there's nothing else on. So for those that like there's a national talk show host, not worth mentioning his name, and that's all he does. It's like, how much can I rip the minor bowl games? I'm going to do that for 3 hours and call it a show. Like, okay, but you're missing the point. Like, that's funny. But the fact of the matter is that they're not going anywhere. It's easy programming and they sell and people watch them. They actually rate. I don't care if there's 5 people in the stands. The playoff, however, I do think there's a natural concern that ratings will continue to dip if you have the same 4 or 5 schools, and particularly if you have the same two schools and times from the same region of the country. So the only way to avoid that, because when people say, well, if we had a BCS, that wouldn't have happened. Wrong again. That's not true. If we had the BCS, it'd be the same 4 or 5 teams playing for the title game. Do the math. The only way to ensure we have geographical balance and more inclusion, which has become a popular word on this topic, is that you give automatic bids to those other leagues. It's the only way to do it. And so if you do that, then all of a sudden you have some fresh blood, and it does spice it up some. My only concern, and it's weird, and I know we got to wrap it up soon because we're going to get ready for Shane. I remember 20 years ago when I first got started in sports talk radio, and one of the hosts I worked with, maybe multiple now that I think about it, they were so anti-playoff, and their whole argument was, well, you kill the regular season if you have a playoff. The best thing that college football is, it's about the regular season, unlike the other games where the games mean everything. And my argument was an 8-team playoff is not going to take away from the significance of Auburn, Alabama, of Florida, Georgia, of Carolina, Clemson, of Michigan, Ohio State, of the week 3 matchup with whoever and whoever. You still, every game, there's going to be something riding on it. Even if you think you've already clinched an 18 playoff, you're going to want that first round either bye or play at home field, which I believe the first round will be home field. So that never stood up to me. But I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. I think when you go to 12, you start to take away. That loss is not as soul crushing as it ordinarily would be. So that's my only concern about going to 12. I thought 8 has been the ideal number for as long as I can remember this discussion going on. And then 12 pops up and it's like, whoa, what, wait, 4 to 12? The sport that moves at a glacial pace on everything in terms of change is now going to do a radical thing where they triple the amount of playoff teams? Wow. This is counter to everything I've ever heard that college football should be. So that's my only final take on that.
Relax. Ride with Founders. When you refinance your new or used vehicle from another financial institution, Founders will beat your existing rate by 1% to a minimum of 1.99% for autos and 4.99% for RVs, or purchase a new or used vehicle and Founders will deposit $100 into your Loyalty Select account. Lower your rate or cash in the bank. Get started on your refi or buy today at foundersfcu.com/refi or buy. Membership qualification required. Terms and conditions apply. Founders Federal Credit Union is federally insured by NCUA.
If you are saving for a down payment to buy a home, you may be able to drop your savings goal from 20% to less than 5%. Ameris Bank offers a wide variety of loan solutions with low and no down payment options. With a quick consultation, the man, the myth, Stuart Wingo, loan officer at Ameris Bank, can help you determine which option best fits your financial needs and gets you into your dream home. If you're looking for a variety of products, competitive rates, and exceptional service, call Stuart Wingo at 803-319-1777. You can also check him out online, amerisbank.com/Stuart Wingo. Save thousands of dollars today by simply calling Stuart Wingo at 803-319-1777. You'll be glad that you did. Back with you on the JC and Morgan podcast. We go from playoff talk to coach talk, and we're going to cover the gamut with our next guest. He is Shane Beamer, getting ready for his first year as a head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks, and kind enough to spend some time. Shane, how are you?
I am awesome. I hope you guys are, and really appreciate you having me on with you. Enjoy visiting with you guys back in the late 2000s, 2007, 9 and 10 when I was here before, and nothing has changed in the 10 years since I've been gone.
I know. I know we've spoken since that point, but the last time I think you and I actually met, we were playing in the Steve Spurrier golf tournament. And your game was much better than mine then, and I'm sure it's even better today. But well, I
don't know about that. I was playing a lot of golf before when I was working for Steve Spurrier. So
yeah, you had to. It was a job requirement.
Yeah, so I'm not playing nearly as much anymore.
Understandable. You got a lot of work to do. There's no question about that. We're going to get into that before we dive right into that, because I know you could ask the same questions about Too Deep and schedule and everything else. A lot of our guests that we've had, I call it the "This Is Your Life" segment, and I want to just go through, because I think your story is a fascinating one, and it's somewhat unique. I've been in the middle of college baseball playoffs, and some of the most successful coaches still standing were grinders, is the term we use. Guys that had to pay their dues, this job, that job, this job, that job, before they finally got that premier job, and I think your career parallels that. Let me go through this real quick. Of course, you played at Virginia Tech for the legendary coach Frank Beamer, your father. Then you get an opportunity in 2000 at Georgia Tech as a GA. Then Tennessee, a GA. Then Mississippi State as an assistant coach. Then, of course, South Carolina, 2007 through 2010. I like to call those the formative years, and we'll backtrack to that. Then to Virginia Tech, assistant head coach, 2011 to 2015. Then Georgia, 2016 to 2017. Then Oklahoma, 2018 to 2020, and here you are. So when you look back at that, are you happy the way everything turned out? I know you could have been a head coach earlier, but again, there's something to be said about a guy who was able to show that versatility, work for so many quality head coaches and learn from them, and take that experience into this great opportunity. What's your overall takeaway from that timeline?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. And my first takeaway is just how blessed I've been to have worked for so many amazing coaches at those schools, from Lincoln Riley all the way that most recently to George O'Leary, who I started with, and then just coaches on those staffs of different places that I've been. You know, when I was at Georgia Tech, Bill O'Brien, the former head coach of the Texans, was the running backs coach. Ralph Friedgen was the offensive coordinator. I go to Tennessee and I'm with, Coach Fulmer, but Doug Marrone, the former head coach of the Jaguars, is on the staff, and so many great people. I'm at Mississippi State, and Joe Judge, the head coach of the Giants, is one of our graduate assistants, and then South Carolina, Virginia Tech. I've just been blessed to be around a lot of great coaches, head coaches, and places. But absolutely, from a career standpoint, for me, I was just telling a recruit and his mom about this the other day. I wouldn't have. If somebody had said, okay, you're 20, I think this is going to be my 22nd year in coaching. If somebody would have said, okay, your 22nd year in coaching, you're going to be the head coach at the University of South Carolina, how would you want to shape it? And I'm not just saying this because it's what happened. I would have done the route that I did, as opposed to of just being an offensive coordinator for the last 10 years or whatever. Nothing against that, but I know a lot of offensive coordinators that have no business being head coaches, and that's not a negative. It's just Some guys are great at designing offenses, but being a head coach is a different animal. And it really helped me to be you're never totally prepared for this chair, but the experiences that I've had have prepared me for this chair better than if I had just gone that route, because I've coached defense, I've coached offense, I've coached special teams. I've been around different types of programs, from Georgia Tech in the middle of downtown Atlanta to Mississippi State in rural Starkville, Mississippi. I've been a recruiting coordinator. I've been a special teams coordinator. I've been an associate head coach. I've been an interim head coach, and all those roles have shaped me and helped me prepare for this chair. I think the narrative, well, he hasn't been an offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. I just think that's a lazy narrative, frankly. I'm not comparing myself to Dabo Sweeney or Urban Meyer, but those guys were never offensive coordinators, and they've been fairly successful as head coaches. Right. So again, whether I'm successful or not in this role, and I have every confidence in the world that we are going to be, it's not going to be because I wasn't an offensive coordinator before I got into this chair.
It's funny you bring that up, because it is changing. And like you said, without names being thrown out there, I've seen several incredibly talented coordinators. The moment they step in that head chair, it crumbles apart, because it doesn't always translate into being a great head coach. And as you gave some examples, many guys today that weren't coordinators have had success as head coaches. There's so much more to the job now, and the salaries for coordinators have never been higher. So you can hire brilliant X and O guys to run the offense and defense, but you really need a head coach to do so much more. And obviously your background lends itself to knowing what those tasks are and being able to handle them.
Yeah, no question. This is you guys are a fantastic podcast, so I don't mean to talk about anybody else, but I was listening to another podcast this morning, and they were interviewing Sean McVay. The head coach of the Rams was on there, and it was him and I believe Peter Schrager, that's on NFL Network. And they were talking about how they said the same thing, like offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators doesn't always translate to being a head coach. And a lot of that is being able to, quote unquote, what they said, command the room. And when Coach Tanner hired me and I came over here on that Sunday and stood in front of the team and talked to the team, and when I do it now, that wasn't the first time I'd ever done that. I've been a special teams coordinator. So when you're the special teams coordinator, you have to stand in front of the whole team and talk. You and the head coach are the only guy that does that in the program. When I was an interim head coach one time at Virginia Tech, I had to do that. So those experiences have certainly prepared me. And then having a great teacher that I watched growing up, and my dad, and all the other things that, come across this desk, and learning from Lincoln and Kirby Smart, who were both first-time head coaches, and I was on their staffs early on. That was very beneficial to see, because honestly, Mike and JC, I felt like I got hired in December. I literally felt like it was late February before I did anything football related, here, at least me being able to go into like the offensive staff room, defensive staff room and talk football, because for so much early on, there's so many other things that come across his desk because you are the CEO, if you will, of a big time business. And there's a lot of other things you have to deal with, which I love, don't get me wrong, but I realize that that's part of it. I'd seen it and I knew that going into it.
Well, I'm going to take you back some while we're going down memory lane. Okay. 1987. That was, I think your dad's first year at Virginia Tech.
It was.
Sterling Sharp, Todd Ellis. You guys had tied the year before in Blacksburg. Your first impressions of Williams-Brice Stadium at that point. And then in 89, I remember this game only because my mom took me to this game. My dad usually took me to the other games. I was 13 or something. The tie game against Todd Ellis, Harold Green, all those guys in Sparky's first year. So your first impressions of Williams-Brice at that point. And then in 89, as you were getting Virginia Tech going, I think it was your dad's third year, that tie was sort of a surprise. Did that give you guys a little momentum? And was that one of the points along the way in building that you said, hey, we're going to get this thing going in the right direction?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So 1986, my dad's coaching at Murray State and they're playing Eastern Kentucky and Eastern Illinois and Austin P and Morehead State. And my first experience with big time college football was coming down here in 1987 when Virginia Tech played South Carolina. And, when you're at Murray State and I'm riding the bus to the game with my dad at Southeast Missouri State, like you didn't have police escorts rolling into Cape Girardeau. But I'll never forget coming here. I guess we stayed. I don't even remember where we stayed. I came down with the team when I was like 10, 11 years old. And I'm guessing we stayed out there on Two Notch Road where a lot of the visiting teams stay when they come to Columbia anyway. And you guys probably know better than me. Like, I don't think 77 went all the way, past like Shop Road and Bluff Road then. Am I right in saying that? Did it stop?
Yeah, they built 277. It opened shortly thereafter that.
Okay. Well, for whatever reason, wherever we stayed, the team buses came down Assembly Street. And my mom will still tell this story. Like, they took the team buses on the opposite side of Assembly Street, like going against traffic where we're in the lane that the cars should be coming towards us. But they did that because that was the police escort. And we're like, holy crap. Like, wow. I mean, this is big time football. And then going into the stadium and playing in front of, however many it was at the time, it was a whole lot more than what we were playing at Murray State and at Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech Stadium at the time seated 50,000. It was just really, it stuck with me because it was my first experience at big time football and just the electricity in Williams-Brice Stadium, the passion, all the things that I love now, I saw early on in my dad's tenure at Virginia Tech. And I think in 87 we got smoked. I don't know.
It was 40-10. I remember that one. and then 2 years later,
Yeah, I do remember. 89 was a night game, if I remember. I think it was like 17-17, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. And they actually had opened with Duke and Steve Spurrier in Sparky's first game and beaten them.
Yep.
And Tech was the next game. And we all thought it was going to be, I'll beat these guys, And, it didn't happen.
It was very memorable because 87, Virginia Tech was 2-9. 88, they were 3-8. That game was early in the season, like you're saying. So you're going into the season, you don't quite know what to expect. And to be able to come down here to South Carolina and play a big-time program and a big-time stadium like that, not that you ever feel good about ties, but that 1989 was my dad's first winning season at Virginia Tech. I think they went 6-4-1 that year. And that trip or that game against South Carolina, if you can gain confidence from a 17-17 tie, I think early on certainly gave that team some confidence because right after that we went to I was 12 years old. We went to West Virginia and beat Major Harris up there in Morgantown and had some good wins along the way that kind of got us going over the hump a little bit for sure.
Yeah, Todd Ellis, Harold Green, Robert Brooks was on that team at Carolina. Corey Miller, number 30, he was number 33. Okay, so my next question is in the current. So I look around, and I've had this theory for a while, like for the past 5 years, that the pros, the NFL football offenses, maybe have been a little more innovative than college in certain aspects. I know you were at Oklahoma where they're very innovative, but you look around the SEC, and I look and I see your coordinator came from the NFL. Bam, I got another guy from the NFL. LSU hired back off of the Panthers staff, and then Kentucky hired a guy off Sean McVay's staff, like you just said. Is that a trend with these? I call them like almost tinker toy offenses where they it's all about matchups and tight ends and H-backs and receivers and different formations and stuff. Is that a trend you could see happening in college football? And do you think with the plan you guys got on offense that maybe you're a little bit ahead of the game? Because it just seems like those types of offenses at the pro level have evolved more quickly the last 5 years.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And really I thought about it, but when you put it like that, it really is pretty eye-opening what the teams in this league and across the country have done. I think one thing with the NFL, with the offenses that I think they have done maybe differently than college offenses is, and you just alluded to it, they're so like matchup driven. And you see so many, if I'm talking to NFL coaches, Marcus Satterfield included, it's so much like, okay, we're going to have these plays, and on these plays, we're going to have these three receivers. We're going to make sure they're in the game with this one running back and one tight end. And we're going to be in this formation, and we want to get this guy matched up on that guy because that's a chance for us to be successful. Because in the NFL, you're talking about 53 guys on a roster and 40 whatever that's active on game day. So everybody's got good players. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. So you've got to do a great job of one, scheming, but then two, getting the matchups in your favor, whether it be by formation, personnel grouping, things like that. So that's certainly something that I know Joe Brady, when he was at LSU, did a great job of with those guys. It's one thing that we're going to try and do a great job of with our guys. Whereas, not that we weren't doing that in college, but most of the offenses I've been around in college, it's more, all right, these are our best players. These guys are going to be on the field every play. And here's the concepts that we run. Mm-hmm. And, I just think that what we're going to try and do, and what a lot of schools are doing, is get our best players to the best of our ability matched up on or into a very favorable matchup, so to speak, against the defender that we're going up against.
Well, that was something that another one of your mentors, Steve Spurrier, was a master at. It wasn't just that he had, going back to the Florida days, more talent than everybody else. If he's in a spread and he's got 4 or 5 wide, he's not necessarily looking for his top guy or second best guy to win the matchup. He's looking for that number 4 guy, because that number 4 guy's going up against the number 4 DB, and he knows he can win that all day long.
That's right.
And so that player, all of a sudden, that's not as nearly as talented as the future first-round draft pick on the opposite side, but there's the matchup. And he was brilliant at that. And that's
you want to be able, not to interrupt you, Mike, I'm sorry. You want to be able to, have the flexibility, and it was important to me because, we did this at Oklahoma, and it's important to me that we're able to do it here at Carolina. Is just the multiplicity and the flexibility within your own system to do that. And I've said it publicly, but we talked about it as an offensive staff after spring practice, like who are our best playmakers on offense? And if it's 3 tight ends and 2 running backs, then let's go play ball, you know? And if it's 5 wide receivers, then let's go. If it's 2 running backs, 2 tight ends and a receiver, whatever, let's have a system that we can utilize. We're not just only able to run this play with these people. We recruit this way, and then we have an offense that if we need to put Jaheim Bell out wide as a receiver, we can. If we want to put him in the slot, we can. If we want to put him in tight end or in the backfield, we can. And I thought Lincoln did a great job of that at Oklahoma. I mean, if you watch my first year at Oklahoma, I was coaching tight ends in 2018, and we had a true tight end on the field, maybe 25 plays a game in 2018. You fast forward to 2020, and we probably played with 2 tight ends on the field over 50% of the time in Oklahoma. So it's all about evolving and getting your best players on the field. That first year we had CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown. We're idiots if we don't have our receivers on the field. The last couple of years, CD left last year, and we had Marvin Mims and maybe not as many other receivers. So we played with more tight ends and running backs. But we had the system that the plays didn't really change. It was just the people doing them.
And something tells me, the run pass ratio and scheme this year might look very different than what it is 3-4 years from now, when you really have your recruiting rolling and your players in the town. That's just adjusting to your personnel. It's only fitting that we would kind of mention Steve Spurrier and your time at South Carolina, because here's my take on your being the right guy for this job. And I don't commentate very often on this stuff, but I can tell you I've been asked on a number of different shows when the hire was made about this, that, and the other. And it just goes to show you too, because in doing some shows in this podcast and Sirius XM, we talked about ranking the 4 hires last year. And I can tell you nobody had Eli Drinkwitz and Sam Pittman as great hires. But guess what? They both did a great job. And sometimes it's not the big name that turns out to be the home run hire. We see it time and time again. When I go back to Steve Spurrier, give Mike McGee credit. He got the contract done, but that was a guy who sought out the South Carolina job. He wanted that job. He wanted back in the SEC, could have gone other places in the ACC. He wanted to go somewhere, not Alabama, where they have national championship trophies all over the place. He wanted to go somewhere like he did at Duke and like he did at Florida and do things that had never been done. I thought South Carolina needed to go outside the box a little bit, not just hire a retread, but get somebody who truly wants this job and to make a name for himself with this job. And I started hearing years ago, hey, if there's ever an opening, don't outrule Shane Beamer. I was like, is that what he wants? I mean, I don't know. And clearly this was something you had on your radar for a while. And I would just, none of us have a crystal ball how everything's going to work out. But I just think it was so important for that school and that program to hire somebody that truly saw this job as destination number one. Am I onto something there?
Without a doubt. One, I did. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just to be a head coach. It was to be a head coach at South Carolina, where I ultimately wanted to be. I felt that way ever since we left for a lot of different reasons. And it was a dream to come back. And you can love living somewhere and love the people, but you better be going to a place where you can be successful, or that dream is not going to last very long. And sure. I saw that. Kind of like what you're saying with Coach Spurrier. I mean, it motivates me. One, I know we can win here. I know how we won here when I was here before with the resources that we had. Now I look at the resources we have now with this amazing facility and everything else that's changed since I've been gone. And we won before, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it again. And Coach Spurrier, I mean, right, I'm in my office and it's hanging on the wall, a towel that they gave out in the Georgia Dome back in 2010 for the SEC championship game. It's in a frame hanging on the wall because we got there. Some programs, they may talk about winning championships and things like that, but realistically, it's probably never going to happen because they haven't been able to for 100 years of football. So it's not all of a sudden going to change. Here, we've been there. There's no reason why we can't be back and not just get back, but win this thing and accelerate or exceed the expectations and take this program where, somewhere where it's never been before. So that motivates me each and every day. And then what you just said, I had a mom of a recruit that was in my office the other day, and she said to me, it's very easy to see how much you love this place, that it's very genuine. Like a lot of head coaches we've been around, it's just a job. With you, we can tell in the 48 hours that we've been here that it's very real. You do love this place. What you're telling us is not a bunch of BS. It's real in what you believe, and it's not just a sales pitch. And I appreciated her saying that, and she's exactly right. I do love this place, and I know what this place can be.
Seems like I got one more thing. Just the people I've talked to, and I don't know, obviously I've followed the program and covered the program, and I heard a lot about before you got there. I think it was typical of any transition when you're losing and have a coach fired or whatever. But everybody I've talked to, Shane, says not only is it a lot of fun, and keep in mind, we're living in a world where there's an article in The Athletic that says this is the worst month in the history of college football coaching to be a college football coach because of the NIL and portal and recruiting and all that. And so there's a lot of griping going on. Everything I see, social media, off the record, on the record, whoever you talk to says South Carolina football right now, without playing a game, just in the offseason, is just a whole lot of fun. I mean, you guys, everything from the prank you played on the players the other day with the FaceTime or whatever to just people that, hey, I wasn't having a lot of fun about 5 months ago, but now I am. How important is that, when you're facing a turnaround? Like you said, you were there first year with Kirby Smart at Georgia. You were there under Spurrier at South Carolina with Sylvester Croom at Mississippi State. How important is it to these days to create that type of atmosphere?
I think it's critical. I mean, it's how I am as a person. Anybody that knows me, I mean, I've always tried to be a positive, consistent, high energy type of guy, and that's never going to change. And I heard that from the players when I took over. Now, and this isn't knocking the previous staff or anything. Last year was a long year for everyone. South Carolina's coach got fired during the season. They won 2 games. You were dealing with COVID, everything, social injustice. It was a long year for everybody. It was a long year for us at Oklahoma. We won the Big 12 championship. But from sitting down and talking with the players when I got hired, you're right. From listening to them, there wasn't a lot of joy in this building. They dreaded coming into this facility each day for a lot of different reasons. And Lincoln talked about this at Oklahoma, and he's right. With everything that was going on last year in college football, the 4 hours that our players came to spend in the football facility each day was probably and needed to be like the highlight of their day. Because after that, they were going back to dorm rooms and isolating and everything else that you were doing last fall. So that's important to me. I want to be invested in our players' lives, and you got to have fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. We're demanding. We hold them accountable. We work hard. I mean, it's a grind, but you got to enjoy and have passion for what you're doing. And I certainly do. People may say longest month. I mean, I find it exciting. I mean, as soon as I get off this call with you guys with this podcast, like I'm going to go into a staff meeting and we're going to talk about the 10 guys coming in on official visits, possibly 11 now. Not to mention this weekend, not to mention the 2 camps we have going on Friday and Sunday, not to mention a dang all-star team of guys coming in on unofficial visits this weekend because they're hearing everything that's going on about South Carolina football. That excites me. I haven't moved into a house yet. I'm still living in a condo 200 yards from this facility. So, I mean, I jump out of bed each morning and I can't wait to get in here and not just go to work, but to be around the players and to have recruits in here and get to know their families. I mean, I get it. The honeymoon phase is still going on. We haven't lost a game, but I mean, I'm loving every second of it and won't stop being that way.
I just happen to know a guy who's a sponsor that can get you a great mortgage on that when you buy that house. But we'll talk later about that. I know you got to run. I'm just going to give you one last rather quick hitter type question. Other than your dad, every coach leans on somebody during a time, whether it's a stressful time, it's adversity, or even a good thing, that you can pick up the phone and call and chat with and say, hey, I need to talk to you about this. I need some advice on this. You, of course, as we've documented, have quite a pool of guys that would be candidates. So excluding your dad, who's going to be the first guy you call and say, hey, look, I really need to have a heart-to-heart about this. Tell me what you think. Give me your take on what this situation looks like and what should be done.
Well, it won't be the first because we're like on number 9, 10, 11, and 12 by now. I probably have head coaches and people. I've probably talked to Lincoln more than anybody since I got the job here. And that's more, it's a credit to him and what kind of person he is. But he calls and checks on me every couple of weeks. Just, hey, man, just making sure you're okay, make sure you're doing all right, anything and whatnot. So he's been great. And really, I got these helmets behind me of all the places that I've coached, and I've talked to every single coach that I've ever worked for. I've had at least one conversation with all those guys since I got the job. I mean, Philip Fulmer reached out to me a couple of days ago, and I talked to Sylvester Croom regularly, somebody that I've got an immense amount of respect for. But one thing I've done is I've reached out I took the month of May when our players were gone and it was a little bit slower. And I reached out to, I think, probably 6 NFL head coaches that I knew or had a somewhat of a relationship with, and then about 6 coaches in college, and just kind of picked their brains on being a first-time head coach, mistakes they made in year one, things they wish they knew then that they know now. And that was good for me just to talk to those guys and hear some of their feedback. And a lot of those guys that said, hey, pick up the phone anytime you have a question about anything or want to talk. We're all in this thing together and we're all battling the same thing. So, I don't know if there's just one. I'm blessed that, I've tried to develop relationships with a lot of people, and there's a lot of guys that, I may be calling on just to bounce ideas off of and things like that as well. And frankly, we've got a lot of, people in this building that I've hired, from on the 10 coaches to Luke Day and Chip Morton in our weight room. There's not many decisions that I don't bounce off their, brains, see what you think and stuff like that. Or Derek Moore, who we hired from Georgia Tech, or Connor Shaw, or whoever. Ultimately, I'm the decision maker. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but But certainly, there's a lot of guys whose feedback and opinion I value in this building as well.
It's an impressive speed dial list, that's for sure. Coach, can't thank you enough for the time. Next time we can get into some nitty gritty on Too Deep and what the offense looks like and the staff. But I thought this would be neat to just kind of get another perspective of you and the hire and everything else. Wish you the best of luck. And next time we're partnered in a golf tournament, I'll try to put together a more respectable outing.
Well, you and I both, but appreciate you guys having me on. Got a ton of respect for you guys and the jobs that y'all do, and always enjoy hearing you and listening to you. So thanks for letting me join you today as well. Can't wait to do it again soon.
Thank you, Shane. Best of luck.
Shane.
Thanks, fellas.
Friends, JC Sherbert here. If you're a business owner, you're always looking to save time and, more importantly, save money. And that's why I want to tell you about my friends at iHelp Consulting. iHelp is a Gamecock. For those of you, the South Carolina Gamecocks, owned and operated company whose mission is to help businesses save money on expensive credit card processing, internet, insurance, anything else. iHelp can help your business find the most savings without sacrificing quality. Call my good friend Daniel at 843-372-5713 for a free consultation. 843-372-5713. That's iHelp Consulting. How can I help you?
Special thanks again to South Carolina head football coach Shane Beamer. We've been rocking and rolling on this guest list here really since we entered the Zoom world, and that allowed JC and I to be a little more guest heavy. Because we always got plenty to say, but it's good to hear from some of the other folks, and obviously good to hear from some coaches as well. I think it's going to be a really interesting year one for Shane Beamer and company. I think I saw, JC, you would know this better than I, is the over-under in Vegas, is it 4 wins for South Carolina this year?
Yeah, and look, it's they got a road game at East Carolina that's in year 3 of a build under Mike Houston, who's an excellent coach. And so that's tricky. And, you sort of look at who they lost on defense, and there's a lot of unknowns. And I think I would probably have put it at 4.5, to be honest. But I think that's fair. But I also think this, when you look at the front end of their schedule, you got Eastern Illinois, East Carolina, you go to Georgia in week 3. But then it's Kentucky at home, which is a pain. Don't get me wrong, but it's in Columbia. Troy at home, at Tennessee, and Vanderbilt at home. Before then, you go A&M, Florida, at Missouri, Auburn, and Clemson to close it out. So if they can get off to a good start, which, usually teams that can run the ball pretty well, and I think they will, can win their share, it could be a successful first season. That schedule's backloaded, and if you're year one of a staff, I think having it backloaded is a lot better than having it front loaded.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I was talking about this on a show this morning, and that the East, I don't recall a time, and you and I got into the quarterback situation in the league as a whole the last podcast this year. There's a lot of turnover. It almost resembles that 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
And
16. Yeah. There was nobody.
There was just nobody, and the league. I use the term "suffered" in quotation marks because you still had Alabama was Alabama, and so on and so forth. The top to bottom, the SEC was not the SEC. This year, I'm not going to go quite that far, but there's a lot of turnover. But on the Eastern Division, Tennessee rebuild mode. Vanderbilt is, I guess you could say, in perpetual rebuild mode.
Yeah,
in a way.
And it's even more so. They've got
even more so,
yeah.
Right? South Carolina rebuild mode. Missouri's got Connor Bazelak, and they've got a second-year head coach. But I'd hardly say that they've arrived just yet. Even though I'm a big Bazelak guy, and I like their coach too. And then Kentucky, they had their great back-to-back 10-win seasons, took a step backward last year, and I don't know what we're looking at with Kentucky this year. So it's like there's Georgia that's in its own tier in my mind. Mm-hmm. There's Florida in its own tier behind Georgia. And then there's a whole lot of who the heck knows from 3 through 7 in the East.
And and so for a team like South Carolina or Kentucky or Missouri, it'll be interesting and it'll at least be competitive. And South Carolina did win 2 games last year, 2-8, but that's a little misleading because there was no non-conference. You didn't get to play Wofford and Troy and Furman and then whoever else was on the schedule last year. So that team probably would have won 4-5. Mm-hmm. I think Muschamp probably still would have gotten fired, but And Coastal Carolina was on the schedule of the opener. So I always tell people either Muschamp would have gotten off to a great start or the Mike Bobo era would have been 11 games long had Coastal come in there and beaten the Gamecocks in the opener. But, look, I think it works out well for Shane and the new coordinator. I mean, he's got 2 coordinators that have never coached in the SEC before. But I think a lot of times that's a little overrated because – I've seen a lot of coordinators that have not coached in the SEC that have come in and kind of their first year was their best year, in first couple of years was their best years in a lot of ways because teams didn't know what to expect. So I think again, the schedule works out really well. If this were last season's all conference schedule and he had to open with Tennessee and Florida, I'd be less nervous about Tennessee, but really nervous about the Swamp and then having to go to LSU and all this other stuff. But, we've both known Shane Beamer for years, and I've always thought he was a future head coach somewhere. And as time moved on, I remember the 2015 South Carolina coaching search. I wrote 2 articles about the case for Coach A, and one was for Will Muschamp because I sort of thought he'd hire a different offensive coordinator at the time and kind of believed that, he would rehabilitate and maybe the Florida job had some things. But as we all saw, the bottom fell out too there. And the other was for Shane Beamer. I wrote that in 2015. I've always thought that, he was a guy that had, as he talked about how to be a head coach and all that, that's different than being a coordinator. Urban Meyer, Lou Holtz. Mac Brown was only a coordinator for 1 year at Oklahoma, and they ran the option, so it was really Barry Switz. I mean, a lot of the great ones never were coordinators. Dabo Sweeney.
How many play calls has Ed Orgeron made?
None. Never been a coordinator.
There you go.
But a great recruiter, great personality.
Right. And again, it's not a one size fits all. Okay, Ed Orgeron. I can tell you, having done games at Ole Miss shortly after he was fired, they couldn't wait to get him out of there. He was called every name in the book, and then at LSU, he becomes incredibly smart. LSU is an easier job than Ole Miss. South Carolina is a more difficult job than Georgia. I mean, we can go on and on and on.
Sure.
But I'll go back to what I said. This was, to me, a hire that required somebody that truly understood the job and wanted the job. And quite frankly, there hasn't been a great list of candidates that fit those 2 things. And so for me, I don't care what happens. I think it was the right move. as opposed to just getting the mid-major flavor of the month who's looking at it as a potential stepping stone, an increase in pay, or another SEC retread. And we'll see how it works out for sure. Before we wrap things up, I do want to mention, we were kind of joking about this with Shane about getting a new home and getting the right mortgage. And there's so many claims out there and different options. I can only tell you, and I can only tell you what our listeners and so many other people that I know that have gone through Stuart Wingo can tell you. He's just simply really good at his craft. He is tops when it comes to explaining to you what the options are for a refi or a new mortgage. He is tops at getting you the lowest rate and saving you thousands of dollars. What else do you need to know, really? I always give you this phone number. It's not some secretary, and even though he works for Ameris Bank, it's not some switchboard. This is his cell. He'll pick up, he'll answer, he'll call you if he misses you on voicemail. 803-319-1777. It's the one number I can give you today that literally can save you thousands on a new mortgage. 803-319-1777. That's Stuart Wingo of Ameris Bank. As we put a bow on this one, JC, what are you looking for here? You know, the calendar is in June. The attention is going to be 1,000% football here pretty soon. I know you've got a lot of things going with the website, but not just locally, but big picture. What are you looking forward to in the next few weeks?
I'm really interested to see how many total verbal commits we're sitting on at the end of June. These official visit numbers are what I call extremely pregnant. I can't remember double digits. Shane's right. They got 11 coming in just at South Carolina alone. I think there were 27 guys at the beginning of May that had verbally, or in the month of May that the first 2 weeks of May that have verbally committed. This year, there was 150 last year. I'm curious to see if there's any more portal that happens and all that. And then just one final thing I'll say on your previous point, because I agree with you. That's why I think Clark Lee, right guy at Vandy, Sam Pittman, right guy at Arkansas.
Agreed.
Orgeron, right guy at LSU. There's two schools that have gone from conference hopeful to national contender or champion in the last 20 years, Oregon and Clemson. And Oregon was a long, slow build over time, but they've promoted from within 5 times. Brooks to Bellotti, Bellotti to Kelly, Kelly to Helfrich. Then there was the 1 year Willie Taggart weird thing, but then they got right back up with Cristobal and they're rolling again. And then Clemson, Bowden to Dabo. Those were all guys. They understood Oregon and they understood Clemson. You can even go back to the 80s. And Danny Ford, the other great coach at Clemson, he was an internal promotion as well. So when you're looking for upward mobility in college football, I think having that familiarity really, really helps. And, you know, those 4 guys, and I'll throw Orgeron in there because, like you said, if it wasn't at LSU, maybe it doesn't work. You know, but he's LSU through and through and understands that place. And so, you know, I think there's something to be said for that, for all of those guys. But, you know, looking forward to watching, the new coaches this year, see how they progress. But the 2 big things over the summer, obviously recruiting, and then what else happens in the portal. I mean, you have people going crazy in the reaction to it because you have people going crazy over Eric Gilbert, who, if he's qualified, is a difference maker without a doubt. He's a stud. I mean, no question about it. But, he's got some grades. He's got a little ways to go. And then Darion Kendrick, who was a 5-star prospect and has all the talent in the world, but in big games, championship games, he's gotten lit up a couple of times. And you have people going, it's championship or bust now for Kirby Smart just because of those 2 guys coming in. And I'm like, they had 5 stars by their name coming out, but what's the reality of the situation now? And so I'm looking at some of these portal moves and seeing what's the reaction and the expectation when they happen and what's it based on, and then what's the result we ultimately get at the end of the day. And that kind of all ties back to recruiting in a way, but with it being such a new deal and a new era, and the fact you can leave and hit the portal at any time, I mean, I'm curious to see what moves are made that what will or will not make a difference. And more importantly, from my standpoint, what I'm monitoring is how big of a deal is it at the time and how big of a deal is it ultimately?
That's a great point. Of course, you're mentioning all the huge names in the portal. What doesn't get talked about is the literally hundreds, if not thousands of kids that thought that they were going to be highly coveted. So they were unhappy with playing time or whatever else, got in the portal, and there's no landing spot for them. And I go back to Jamie Newman, who sat out, and again, it's COVID, but I think there was a little more to that story, to be honest with you, from what I hear from people in Athens.
No doubt.
He made a calculated gamble, bet on himself, goes undrafted, and just got cut, by the way. So Jamie Newman, who was going to be the starting quarterback for Georgia, decided to sit on the sidelines and now is looking for work. So you just never know. We are in such a crazy landmark time in college athletics, particularly in football and basketball, that it's going to be very interesting to see how everything turns out. I know one thing. I am glad that we're going to have full stadiums again. I'm getting ready to call an Arkansas NC State Super Regional. There will be over 12,000 fans at Baum Walker Stadium, and the only reason there's not more than 12 is that's all they can fit in there. If there was 50, I'm convinced they'd have 50. And we're going to have full stadiums in college football again soon enough. JC, always great to do it, my friend. Enjoyed this one.
Yeah, have fun calling that game. I caught Mississippi State some and Arkansas some on the television and baseball last weekend, and you're absolutely right. That's a good one to be going to or to be covering, and so have a fun time, Mike. Have a great time.
It's one of my favorite times. The Super Regionals, where if you win, you get to remember Omaha the rest of your life, and if you lose, it's soul crushing, and your season's over. You can't. It sells itself. We love that in sports. We love that certainly in the television circles. Again, our thanks to Shane Beamer for joining us, and we will be back before too long. For JC, Mike saying so long for now. Thanks again for tuning in to JC and Morgan.